All right, today we are diving into one of the most exclusive pieces of metal on the planet, the JP Morgan Reserve card. I mean, this thing is so rare, it's basically a myth. But is there more to it than just the heavy metal and the bragging rights? Is there actually a secret financial hack hiding in plain sight? Well, let's find out.
So, let's start with the big number, $10 million. And let's be clear, that's not your salary and it's not the value of your house. We're talking $10 million in investable assets that you need to have parked with JP Morgan's private bank just to get on the list for an invitation.
So, get this. The key takeaway here is that this isn't about how much you spend, it's all about how much you have. That $10 million bucks, that's the password to get into a very, very exclusive club.
Okay, so first things first, we really need to break down what invitation only actually means. It's a phrase that gets tossed around a lot, but trust me, in this world, it's on a whole other level.
You know, when most of us think exclusive card, our minds jump to the Amex Black Card, right? But see, that's a card you get by spending a ton of money, like over $350,000 a year. The JP Morgan Reserve, totally different ballgame. It's not what you spend, it's what you have. That $10 million requirement puts it in its own stratosphere.
And this quote right here just perfectly illustrates how secretive this whole thing is. Our source for this story walked into a regular Chase bank, you know, the public part of JP Morgan, and asked about the card. The banker he talked to, he had never even heard of it. This isn't something you can just go and ask for. It has to find you.
So we've established that this card is practically a ghost. But let's shift from that abstract idea to the real world. What does it actually look and feel like when this thing finally arrives?
Well, the whole experience is just pure theater. It doesn't show up in some flimsy paper envelope. No. It arrives in this heavy, substantial box with a kind of leather feel to it. And when you open it, the card isn't just tossed in there, it's presented on a metal board. The card itself is solid metal. People say it has palladium in it, and it feels way heavier than any other metal card out there.
In fact, and you gotta love this, it is so dense with metal that it can apparently set off airport metal detectors. I mean, just think about that for a second. Your credit card triggering a security alert, it's a pretty wild, tangible reminder of just how different this thing is.
But to really understand this card today, you have to know its history. There's a story behind why it exists in its current form, and it all has to do with the ghost of a card called the Palladium. So here's what happened. Before 2016, this exclusive card was called the Palladium card, and it had a pretty steep annual fee of $595. Then, its own company, Chase, released the Sapphire Reserve to the public. And here's the problem. It had the exact same benefits for only $450. As you can imagine, Palladium cardholders were furious. So JP Morgan had to scramble, rebrand their exclusive card, and drop the fee to match. And that's how the JP Morgan Reserve was born.
Which leads us to the $10 million question. If this super exclusive card was basically forced to copy its little brother, what perks do you actually get for having all that money in the bank?
And this is where the story takes a really weird turn, because on paper, the benefits are, well, they're identical. The same $450 annual fee as the Sapphire Reserve, the same $300 travel credit, the same points on dining, the same lounge access, everything. For a card that requires a $10 million relationship, the perks you can actually use are exactly the same as a card anyone with a good credit score can apply for.
So, what's the deal, right? If the perks are the same, is the only real benefit what people call the subtle flex? You know, just the status of having something almost nobody else can get? Well, that can't be the whole story. And it isn't. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. Because if you look past the flex, there's some hidden math that reveals the card's true value. And it turns the status symbol into, believe it or not, a really smart financial decision. It all kicks off with this number, 60,000. That's the sign-up bonus you get in points when you're invited to get the JP Morgan Reserve. Okay, so what's that worth in actual money? Well, when you redeem those 60,000 points for travel through the Chase website, that bonus translates to about $1,100. A pretty solid start.
But wait, it gets better. Remember that $300 annual travel credit? Well, new card holders can pull off a neat little trick called a double dip. You claim the credit once in your first year, and then as soon as the calendar flips to January 1st, you claim it again. Boom! That's another $600 in your pocket.
So let's just do the math real quick. You take the $1,100 you get from that sign-up bonus, you add the $600 from double-dipping the travel credits, and you end up with a grand total of $1,700 in pure value. And that's just in the first year. Now look at this. You have that $1,700 in value coming in. You subtract the $450 annual fee that you have to pay, and you walk away with a net profit of $1,250. You literally make money just for getting the card.
So the play here is actually pretty simple. If you already have a Chase Sapphire Reserve and you get this invite, it's a no-brainer. You accept the JP Morgan Reserve, you pocket that huge first-year profit, and then you just downgrade your old Sapphire card to one with no fee. You get to keep the better, more exclusive card, and you make a nice chunk of change in the process.
It really is just like the source said. This whole thing isn't just about showing off a cool piece of metal. In his words, I'm making $1,250 in value just by getting this credit card. It's a calculated financial win.
So that leaves us with this final, kind of fascinating thought. The JP Morgan Reserve card starts out as this ultimate symbol of wealth and status. But when you peel back the layers, when you look past the metal and the mystery, its real power might just be a clever financial trick hiding in plain sight. So, when is a status symbol also a smart financial move? Apparently, it's when it pays you $1,250 just to own it.